Right, this is a story of two pickpockets. And the first one came from very close to here. And when he was a young lad in his early teens, he had sort of longish, scruffy hair, you know, unruly hair, wore baggy t-shirts, threadbare jeans and trainers. In a word, he was scruffy. But it didn't matter, because all his mates were the same. He used to hang around on the street corners and in the market, and that's where he learnt his trade, if you like. He became a very good pickpocket. And when he left school, he got no qualifications, but they didn't matter, because he knew what he was going to do. He was going to make a living picking pockets. So what he did, he got his hair cut nice and short and tidy, bought himself a suit off the peg, a couple of shirts, tie, leather shoes, and then he started commuting into Birmingham every day, there and back. And you know, he always travelled on public transport, sometimes on the bus, sometimes on the train, sometimes it was from one bus stop on a different route. And there's always plenty of pickings there in the bus queue. You know, there's always people who, in the morning, they still hadn't woken up, easy prey. And then in the evening, you know, people were just that glad to get out of work and all they could think about was getting home. They didn't concentrate on what they were doing. And during the day, he'd wander around the bull ring or into the shops there, and he made quite a good living actually for a few years. And then one day, after what he called an hard day at the office, he got home and switched the telly on. And there was a thing on the local news there saying that there was a gang of pickpockets at work in Birmingham town centre, and the police were going to clamp down on. Well, in fact, there wasn't a gang of pickpockets at all. It was just this lad. He was so prolific, you see. But it jogged him a bit. He thought, it's time to pack this in, you know, and going nowhere. You know, he sort of needed a career change, if you like, but he wasn't going to change his career. He was just going to change the direction he went in. How he had his hair styled and cut nicely. He bought a couple of bespoke suits, nice shirts and silk ties, handmade shoes. And then he went to London. Oh no, he didn't think, you know, the streets of London were paved with gold, but he knew that's where he'd find good pickings. And that first day down in London, he didn't mean to go out picking pockets. He was just surveying the ground, so to speak. He went into Oxford Street, he went into one of the big stores, and he looked around, and he caught a reflection of himself in the mirror, and he thought, yeah, you know, I blend in. And that's what it's all about with pickpocketing. You've got to blend in. And he'd always blended in as a young lad. When he travelled into Birmingham, he blended in, and here, he blended in. He was dressed properly. He presented himself properly. And he looked round the store, and everybody, you know, belonged there. Well, as I say, he didn't intend to do any business that day, but then he noticed this middle-aged fella up at the perfume store, buying perfume, perhaps for his wife, or maybe for his mistress, who knows. But he got this big wallet out, wedged with money. Well, he ain't going to leave that behind, is he? So he moved in and he picked the wallet out of the fella's pocket and dropped it in his own. He was just about to go off and he noticed the watch. Big, heavy, expensive watch. Might as well take that at the same time. So he took the watch and he went to drop it in his pocket with the wallet. the wallet was gone. I've been robbed! You know, what sort of a place is this? So he started to look round that store, and everybody just looked like they belonged there. There was just one, a very attractive young lady, and she just held his gaze for that split second too long. Slowly he surveyed the room again, and there it was again, that young lady, just held his gaze that split second too long. And then she turned and walked out the store, so he followed her. So he followed her out, and she went into a coffee shop. He walked in and he sat down, she sat down at the table, he sat down at the same table. And he says, "It was you, wasn't it?" He says, "What was me?" He says, "You stole my wallet." I said, "Oh, it's your wallet, was it?" I said, "I watched you." I says, "And you're good." I said, "But you're not as good as me." Well, you know, it was a challenge, wasn't it? So they decided to meet up the next day and go out and work together. And at the end of the day, they had to agree they were both bloody good. But the thing was, they had such a good time. You know, working together, it was fun. Whereas he'd always worked on his own before, this was fun, it was great. And it was easier because one could set up a distraction while the other did the job. Or, you know, one could do the job and the other one could watch the back. So they decided to work together. And they did. Well, of course, two good-looking young people working together, they soon fell in love. They actually got married. Yeah. Then sparring, another, you know, okay. Anyway, they carried on in what they referred to as their family business. And they were doing really, really well. And then the young lady fell pregnant. And they were overjoyed. They were going to have a child. They were really, you know, look forward to it. And then she gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. And they were really overjoyed. Well, he took paternity leave because, well, the firm could afford it, you see, he had a few days off. And then he went back to work on his own. But that first day when he returned home, he got home and his wife was distraught. He says, "What's the matter?" I says, "It's the lad. There's something wrong with him." And this is what every parent dreads, you know, an illness. And she said, "What's wrong?" He says, "Never noticed it before, but his hand, he can't use his right hand. It's clenched in a fist and held tight to his chest." And he says, "Yeah," he says, "you're right. He always does that. I've never noticed it." Well, straight away they went down to the hospital, and the hospital ran a few checks. They couldn't find anything wrong. Well, they decided on a second opinion. So they took him to an Harley Street specialist. Went down to this specialist's office in the afternoon, of course, because I mean, you know, the specialists work for the NHS in the morning, don't they? And they do their own stuff on the afternoon. So in the walk, a right pompous guy, you know, he got the dicky bow, fancy waistcoat, you know, they got this big, heavy gold watch on an heavy gold chain. And well, even given the gravity of the situation, they couldn't help but look at one another and thought, yeah, if we met you outside, we'd soon relieve you of that. But anyway, the specialist did some tests. Couldn't find anything wrong, and he said to the mother, said, "Hold the child up, facing me." So the mother held the child. And the specialist took his watch and he started to swing it from side to side. The child's eyes just watched. The child's head moved, followed the watch from side to side. The specialist brought it forward, closer, and he watched it from side to side. Then he brought it a bit closer, and as soon as that watch was in grasping distance, the child's hand shot out and locked onto the watch. But when it did, he dropped something to the floor. And when they picked it up, had to be the midwife's gold. So, I told you this was about two pickpockets. In fact, it was about 3. But anyway, bear with me a bit. The first time I ever told this story was down at the old Crystal down in Stourbridge, quite a long time ago now. And we got Nancy Kerr and James Fagan as guests. I mean, they were quite young then. And of course, I told this story, and James Fagan, given his surname, and the fact that he'd just come over from Australia to marry Nancy, you know, he thought I was having a go at his heritage. So I would.